Well, hello, everyone. I'm Amelia Heath, co-director at Forth Rivers Trust, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person today. I wish I could have. But I'm going to talk to you today about Landscape Enterprise Networks, or LENs, and what they are and how they might be able to benefit our rivers. So the wider aim of my presentation is kind of hopefully to inspire some further discussion or even thought about potential advantages, disadvantages, differences between landscape enterprise networks or LENs and other nature finance models emerging within our sector, especially with relation to how they might impact our rivers. And it's been so good to hear some of the updates and presentations from other members here involved in private finance projects in the conference. Because Forth Rivers Trust has been grappling with so many questions over nature finance in the last year and a half. How do we access it as a resource for river habitat restoration? If we access it, what will it fund? What will that funding look like? How long will it last? How do we scale it up? We've been trying to answer some of these questions by being a part of a project to establish a landscape enterprise network, which I'll refer to as LENs from here on, in our river Leven catchment. So by way of setting the scene, this is the whole Forth Rivers Trust District. It's all the rivers and tributaries that flow into the Forth, and highlighted by the red arrow that you see in the green is our river Leven catchment. And I'll be referring to that throughout the presentation today, specifically the upper catchment and the rivers and tributaries that flow into Loch Leven above Kinross. So as a bit of background, in December 2023, Forth Rivers Trust was commissioned to undertake a scoping study into the feasibility and potential of a LENs in the Leven catchment. The scoping study was co-funded by Scottish Enterprise, who had an interest in finding out more about Leven-specific businesses and demands for a LENs, and Nature Scott, who had an interest in finding out the potential for co-funding measures that would directly address the water quality issues faced by Loch Leven. So this set the trust up with a task, first of all, to see if a LENs could be established, and it set us up with a question: could a LENs be established to benefit the catchment rivers that flow into the loch and help to improve the water quality of the loch itself? Our initial scope and study determined there was enough demand to further explore a LENs in the Leven region. So we established some partnerships and we secured a further 18 months worth of Ferns funding. And we started to pursue what the initial trades and governance mechanism of a Leven LENs might look like. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. I've still not defined landscape enterprise networks or how they work. So first, a definition of LENs. The first thing to note is there's not really any simple definition of LENs. It's place-based and it operates regionally, so no two LENs ever look exactly alike. Succinctly put, LENs is a framework for doing business and a mechanism for transactions. It's a nature finance model where demand and supply are brought together based on identified landscape dependencies and opportunities, with the aim of transacting a marketplace within which more resilient landscapes are created. Demand can be public or private bodies. It can range from large corporations to small regional businesses, to water companies, to local authorities or public bodies like Nature Scott. Supply are landowners and land managers, not just farmers, though this is what LENs has previously been known for. It can be anyone with a landholding, and it's not uncommon in LENs for demand actors with large landholdings to also be supply actors. So how are opportunities identified? Well, LENs operates at a regional level, like I said, so it starts on a small scale, identifying overlapping interests in the landscape towards an initial trade. In our case of Leven, we're starting by identifying a handful of interested businesses and a handful of interested landowners to get the process started. From there, we're identifying where interests of local authorities and public bodies overlap with the businesses we've identified. So, for example, if a business is interested in reducing the carbon Scope 3 emissions of their supply chain farms, this may also overlap with a local authority's climate action plan, which then also overlaps with a public body or water company's targets for water quality. And in this way, interventions start to get stacked on the land in a geographically targeted way and matched up with landowners willing to undertake those interventions or sell those interventions on their land. And it's all monitored and verified by a 5 criteria monitoring, reporting, and verification, or MRV system that exists in LINS, which gives demand investors confidence in their investment. And LINS is considered its own code or standard according to a list of UK codes and standards in a recently released research paper on high integrity ecosystem markets. Within the LINS standard, multiple voluntary market mechanisms are integrated together to provide a range of benefits. There are currently 3 operating LINS in England, Cumbria, Yorkshire, and East of England, and 3 operating LINS internationally. I won't go into much detail on this slide because I don't work for 3Keel, even though we're partnered with them for this project. And I'm not selling the LINS concept, so to speak. I just wanted to make the point with this slide that LINS is functioning successfully in other places and is roughly doubling its trades per year, with recently released figures from 3Keel showing approximately £3.1 million being invested in restoration through LINS in 2022, and about £6 million invested in restoration anticipated in 2023. But how much of that is being invested in rivers, and what does that mean in real terms for river restoration? Cumbria LINS is an operational LINS that gives a good example of how overlapping dependencies and opportunities come together to benefit the wider landscape, including rivers. So in Cumbria, Nestle, United Utilities, Cumberland Council, the EA, and Natural England, just to name a few, all found overlapping interests in flood resilience. In 2019, an initial trade focused on improving water quality in the River Petteril and was founded by Nestle Purina and United Utilities. This trade combined a commercial business interest in directly improving its supply chain farmers' agriculture and food resilience with a water company's interest in improving water quality and water source availability. Additional overlapping interests in nutrient management, biodiversity, and soil health improvement were identified and scaled up through the River Petteril catchment. So the Cumbria LINS is now a package of interventions that targets NFM, water quality, biodiversity gain, and soil health improvement. So on to relevance for our Leven LINS case study and what we've learned. What we've learned so far from being part of the LINS project is that it does demonstrate good regional scalability. As mentioned previously, with trades doubling per year, it has thus far had a snowball effect of bringing more and more demand and supply actors into the conversation as it becomes aggregated. So for the Leven region, it's allowed us to start really small, but develop a growth pathway with relative confidence. LINS also moves beyond point-to-point bilateral interventions. So take a peatland code carbon market example. An investor might go directly to a landowner and do a transaction that focuses on improving a single landscape feature like peatland, whereas LINS is dependent on multilateral interests and focuses on combining as many landscape features into a restoration package as possible. And it's based on drawing more and more players into that multilateral cooperation. So again, back to our Leven example, this allows improvement of the rivers and water. This allows improvement of water quality in the rivers and loch to become a fundable intervention, even though there's currently in Scotland not any financial market mechanism or credit mechanism to facilitate investment into that intervention directly. It also allows public and private finance blends in which we're seeing public bodies act as demand players and have more agency in determining the trades and intervention packages that are implemented. So they're playing more of a direct role in shaping those trades and intervention packages. And not only that, demand investors, both public and private, equally share the risk through co-funding. So if interventions don't work, no single actor bears the brunt of that loss. There's already investor confidence in the LINS mechanism. I have business stakeholder testimonials through our Leven LINS project from businesses that have invested previously in LINS in England and who are potentially interested in future LINS, interested in investing in future LINS in Scotland, that say they have confidence in LINS because the MRV system is compliant with greenhouse gas protocols, it's compliant with science-based target initiatives, and its external validators produce outcome validation reports that satisfy their investment criteria. Because of this, LINS capitalizes on ESG on environmental, social, and governance interests of businesses. And it also capitalizes on reputational interests of businesses. And this is not to say offsetting or greenwashing. I want to be really clear on that because I'm not referring to offsetting or greenwashing. I'm referring here to the direct financial gains that businesses receive from being involved in restorative action and improving their operations, e.g., cleaning up their supply chains. LINS also capitalizes on some of the regulatory requirements that exist in relation to climate change, so net zero targets, carbon emissions targets. These are combined into a discussion on how we improve our landscapes, and as we saw in Cumbria and as we're pursuing in Leven, how we improve our rivers and lochs. And finally, it creates innovative interventions. So as in LINS Cumbria and what we're looking toward with Leven LINS, it combines business interests in improving agricultural practice and sustainable farming into the same discussion about restoring our rivers and water quality, rather than having those two things siloed out in separate government funds. They're all part of the same landscape package and conversation. But what are some of the unknowns about LINS that we've identified through our project so far? So although some LINS have been trading for a few years now, it's simply not been operating long enough to observe long-term impacts. Is it a sustainable mechanism for long-term change? Well, it seems to be a sustainable model. So, for example, once a business decarbonizes its supply chain, this is something that has to continue in future interventions. Regenerative agriculture, water quality improvement, these are all not just one and done. They have to continue to happen. So it's seemingly a sustainable market. Also, existing LINS are demonstrating practice change in farmer clusters that are involved with them, but LINS does not yet capture social impact or social change. So the amount to which practice and behavioral change might be occurring are not even yet being monitored or recorded. And just a small caveat on this, our Leven LINS Ferns funded project does have money to look into and address this. Also, LINS is ultimately demand-led, so although it allows for more scope for innovative interventions that address multiple landscape functions, if there's not investment interest in a particular thing, it's still unlikely that that particular thing will be funded. So can it be used to deliver for specific species, for example? Well, that remains to be seen, because this would be demand dependent and would require demonstrating overlap with a wide range of other investment interests. And can it create change at a landscape scale? So my answer to this would be yes, but. So yes, as a LINS grows, regional business networks develop and scale up, but that doesn't necessarily equate to the scaled up intervention that you would pursue, say, if you were following a catchment management plan, or if you were pursuing specific species targets for restoration. So in conclusion, to return to the initial question, can a LINS be established to benefit the catchment rivers that flow into Loch Leven and help improve the water quality of the loch itself? At present, there seems to be sufficient demand to facilitate the creation of a LINS that will directly impact the water quality of the Leven catchment rivers. We're currently mapping overlapping interest for flood resilience, water quality, biodiversity, and soil health. There is already an existing LINS which serves as a replicable model for NFM, nutrient management, biodiversity gain, and soil health interventions in Cumbria LINS. How LINS scales up in Leven in terms of catchment restoration and directly impacting certain aspects of the freshwater ecosystem within the Leven catchment rivers remains to be determined, because it will be demand-led. And further research needs to be undertaken to determine which scalable interventions will have the most impact on the freshwater ecosystems and demonstrate how these interventions align with agricultural and sustainable food system interventions as well. And finally, behavioral change and practice change that may demonstrate the long-term impacts of LINS need to be monitored and recorded, as well as the regional socioeconomic impacts of LINS, because this is a gap that exists in LINS currently. And so with that, I will conclude my presentation and say that hopefully I'll have more to update on this in future years, and I'll hand it back over to Paul.